paper. And I worked at the Etherington Conservation Center in Greensboro, North Carolina. I learned to make books, and I learned to repair books, and I learned to conserve books. So this is one of the things that we do, and it's good for creasing. Tweezers from my bed. But it's good. This is for giving, I guess, meds to a dog or a cat. I use to squirt glue and where glue needs squirting. I have a mounted needle that's handy for punching holes. And then I also have this special sailmaker's needle. And I use it to smooth clay, to poke holes, to run ribbons through things. And my very best tool that I have loved for many, many years, oh, and I've got glue on it to show you how good a tool it is. That's embarrassing. It's called a Crescelli. And it's a type of spatula. It's made in Italy. And I was so proud when I got my Crescelli because it's a micro spatula. It's super thin. And I was bragging about it one night at a party, and somebody made off with it. So I had to find another one. But this is the sine qua non of micro spatulas, if you're into that. Anyway, those are my main tools that I use in making my work. And I started making doll figures several years ago because I volunteer with the Global Village Project. It is a school for refugee girls and women, and it's located in Decatur, Georgia. I was a volunteer art teacher, and when I volunteered, all this stuff started coming to me: sewing machines, and irons, and fabrics, and wool, and yarn, and all kinds of stuff. But some of it was appropriate for use with my students, and some of it was not. And I was developing these vast piles of fabric samples all over my house. I thought, what on earth am I going to do with these? Dolls. So I started making little figures. And this is representative of the type of soft figure that I like to make. In this figure, I explored making a stomacher, which is a fitted bodice that would go over clothing pre-medieval, medieval period in Europe. And I wanted to see if I could make one, and I could. So I moved on. I do hand-knitted embellishments. I do hand-felted embellishments. I also have, now I'm going to break the rules here and pick her up. This is silk that came out of an old trunk. People just put stuff on my porch. And so I have a punch machine that I use for felting, and I put it through the felting machine and it came out like this, and I thought, that's cool. And all the little leaf pieces that you see here, she's as interesting in the back as she is in the front, came off a blanket that someone had given me because she put it through the washing machine and it felted. And so I decided to felt further, and I did these little leaf shapes. I love old buttons. I know that many of us grew up in households where our mother or our grandmother or a beloved aunt had the button box. Oh, yeah. And more often than not, it was one of those shortbread boxes, the round tins. I have several of them. So I collect old buttons and I like to use them for my work. My face forms are built on either a wooden or a cardboard egg shape, and then I sculpt right onto that. Here's another little figure that I did, and I was seeing whether or not I could do pantaloons and little embellishments using antique braid that someone gave me. It wasn't appropriate for my students, and there wasn't very much, but there was plenty to decorate her little dress. And here's another companion piece to this one over here with a hand-knit hat that has baubles on it. People say, why do you knit so much? Well, it's television work. I just sit and knit or sew, make things. Here's an antique button from Germany that someone gave me, and I have fun with them. This is hand-spun wool on the hair, and someone gave me that hand-spun wool. Now, this has mohair in it, and it was inappropriate for my students, so home it went, and I put it on another piece, and there's a third little piece with a hand-crocheted hat. Let's see, let's move over here. I like showing the palm chakra and their hands are up in a gesture of power. I kept thinking about that, what could I do? And someone gave me some manzanita branches. It's a very hard wood. And I thought, what if I just do branches instead of arms? So these figures came out of that. I've made many of them, and I have fun with them. These are snake vertebrae.
Oh, wow.
I was at a yard sale. I'm a veteran yard sailor, and I found a little evening purse, and it had these things all over it. And if you look at them, you can see where on a spine, you have these openings in the spine and the various veins and fluids and stuff run down the spine. That's where those things went on this snake, because all these little vertebrae just line up one next to the other. And I got the piece home. The woman who was holding the yard sale handed me the purse, and she said, just take this. Nobody knows. Just take it. It was very old. I got home, and it had a label in the bag. So I looked it up on eBay, and it's this wonderful snake vertebra covered bag. They're dyed. I thought, oh, hot dog, I've made a good choice here. So I have used snake vertebra in my pieces for years. I can't believe that this little tiny bag that I would have sworn was an evening bag would be such a great source for these beautiful little embellishments. These embellishments are polymer clay. And it was interesting that you had the book with the polymer clay figures, and that they call that the new clay. Polymer clay, because polymer lends itself to all kinds of marvelous techniques in the production. This is called mokume game. It's a Japanese metal layering technique that is so much easier to do with clay, because clay is soft. So it involves doing lots of little tiny layers and then piercing those layers and then slicing. These are hand knit leaves, more of my television work with a little dust on them. And people give me string and old yarn and linen line and stuff like that. This is a candy tin with little wheels on it that who knows, I found it at a yard sale. And then I have Milagros, the sterling, the silver figures. And here's a little antique heart. I used to live on a farm in Pickens County in North Georgia, and I would find antler culls all over the place. When the rutting season was over and the deer had shed their antlers, I would find antler culls. And the notion of bones was so fascinating to me. So I'd gather those culls and take them home and saw them up and start using them on pieces. And this little one, and then the blue one over there, I think of as sisters. They're companion pieces. And they have the antler culls, they have pieces of copper that I've eaten and patinated. This is bone. I was at yet another yard sale or antique store, or whatever it was, and found a display piece that was a piece like this on a base, and it was completely covered in these little bone plates. I said, what is this? And they said, oh, it's from a men's haberdasher shop. And we got it, and we don't know what to do with it, so we're just going to sell it. And I said, what are you selling it for? Oh, we couldn't let it go for less than $5. My hand was shaking as I handed out the money, and I harvested so many of these wonderful little bone plates. And again, she has the requisite duty, so she's got places to go, as all of us do. This is a more recent piece. This I've done since the pandemic, and as you might be able to tell, this figure has the plague mask. And I'm fascinated by the plague mask. So again, hand knit, little baubles and things. I found a bird piece and I patinated that and put it on there. The wheels. And these are bits that I took off belly dancing belts that are worn low on the hips. And I was at yet another yard sale, and this woman had 2 belly dancing belts. And I kept looking at them, and they're not expensive silver, but they're silver. So I kept looking at them, and she said, it's time to go home. I just want to get rid of these. What do you want for them? Oh, I couldn't take under $15 for both. And we're all scavengers. That's how we get things done. So all around, here's another manzanita piece. These pieces, these 6 tall pieces, I just wanted to see if I could make a tall piece. And I cut these pieces start with a muslin base. And I make up a pattern, cut it out, sew it up, stuff it, and then I start collaging old hymnal pages. Someone gave me an old Lutheran hymnal, and I love shape note singing. I grew up singing in my family, and it's not shape note, but it reminds me of shape note singing. These days, if you have a shape note hymnal, you want to give it to the Smithsonian or to some place where some crazy artist is not going to tear it up and collage it on the These round pieces that you see here, and then on the pandemic position piece, those round pieces are made of vinyl records, and they come from Africa. They're all different colors. I haunt the baby shows and buy strings of African vinyl he sheet to put on my pieces. And then the head, the hands, the feet are all polymer clay. These shapes are more of that mokumegane in polymer clay that I love to do. And the fabrics that you see are sheer window fabric samples that come from the Atlanta Decorative Arts Center, or ADAC. And they donate quite a bit to the refugee community, to the sewing classes, to the classes that help women who are on their own. And in the refugee community, there are a lot of women who are on their own because their fathers and uncles and grandfathers and sons and husbands have either been impressed into an army or they have been killed. And the stories that we would hear were just awful. All of this that's going on in Ukraine brings back all of that right in my face. It's hard to deal with. So I stiffen these fabrics and then cut little shapes from them and put them on my pieces. Over here, these are some pieces I made recently. You know, we had that huge cicada event in the fall. Well, I grew up calling them 17-year locusts. That's what my grandparents called them. And I thought they were fabulous. They'd find those little hard shells, and we put them on our fingers and walk around, sit on your hand. I've got creepy things on my hands. And so we were going to have a show about one Earth, one planet, one chance, and it's about environmental degradation. Just like canaries in mines, my understanding is that cicadas are harbingers of what is coming. And so we had this huge cicada event in the fall, and I thought, I'm going to respond to that. So I did hand-painted paper and hand silkscreen paper to cover the body, hand-knit embellishments. And these are my version of African shell pea sheet, or vinyl pea sheet, but they're made of polymer clay. And I put a lot of translucent in there, so they have this depth and this quality. And then these I like goddesses. I like the notion of powerful women. And there's all kinds of lore about the mermaids and the goddesses of the sea. When I lived in South America and my daughter was born, I took her to the ocean and held her up and dedicated her to Iemanjá, who is the goddess of the sea in Brazilian culture. She's found in many, many cultures all around the world. And so somebody gave me some shells that were on a band. They were meant to go on curtains. Well, I don't put shells on my curtains, I put shells on my figures. So I made these coral pieces, and then I wanted them to be made holy, so I did the eye, the third eye, and the top of their head, and they have feet so they can run. It's fun. And the fabrics came from a box of fabric that was not appropriate for my students, so I used them. Then these are hoop dancers. All of the wool that you see here is samples of hand-spun wool, and then this figure's body, again, starting with muslin, stuffed, and then hardened. I use handmade paper. This is soutache braid from France, about 80 years old. Somebody gave me a whole thing of it. And I love the notion of the hoop dancer. You find hoop dancers in cultures all over the world. And it was exciting to me to think about the hoop of life to death, east to west, day to night, the hoop of life, how we grow. And so I did a series of hoop figures that have been popular among people who collect them. These three are all figures that I made in the pandemic. And again, beautifully embroidered fabric that someone gave to me. And I decided to look at headdresses a little differently. And it's been fun doing that. I like the things that appear on my porch because I never know what it's going to be. And my discipline is take what you are given, use it. It's not always easy, but somehow something comes out of it, some little figure. This piece and the one over there are quite similar. I had a student at Global Village who could do anything with her hands. She wasn't good at academics. She had a severe learning disability, and she also had PTSD, had come through a lot of trauma. And she said, I wish that somebody would do a piece about me. So I did her a little piece, and then later I did it again, and I gave her big hands, because she's so good with those hands. And I have big hands. I thought, let's do that. Again, with the bone pieces are here. These are flattened bottle tops, bottle caps. And in the middle are these really lovely Japanese porcelain buttons. I clipped the backs off. Thought, what would happen if I put these buttons in the middle of these flattened bottle caps? I liked what happened. So I found a piece there to do her sort of halo, and she has calories, and she has cattle. These milagros are all cattle. In many cultures, cattle are used as a measure of wealth. The more cows you have, the more goats you have, the wealthier you are. This one is made from a kimono sleeve. I haunt eBay for fabrics and just bits because I don't need yardage, I just need a piece of fabric. And I found this fabric on eBay. It's hand-woven silk ikat. And the ikat is in the weft thread. So if this were on the loom, it would be woven that way, right? And I was a weaver at one time. So when I find beautiful hand-woven, handmade fabric that's just a little piece that I can use for a doll, I scarf it right up. This is polymer clay, and it's made up of many, many, many canes. When a polymer clay artist makes a design, it'll come out in a cane, and the cane looks like a cigarette, except that it's bigger than a cigarette, but it can be about that size. So I made all these little canes, and I started reducing them, that is, pulling them out and making the design smaller and smaller and smaller until I could cut little slices and put them on a background. And I wanted to echo the colors in here. So I was very happy with the way this piece came out, that the design echoed what I had found in the fabric. And this is a hand-dyed batik fabric. I had just a scrap of it. And when I have scraps, I cut them into bias strips, and that way I can wrap around a form and not have bulk, not have seams that I have to deal with. I can just overlap it because it's on the bias and it's real stretchy. This little piece is made with paste paper. Has anybody made paste paper? You guys. I know somebody in this room has made paste paper. I make paste paper using a good marbling paper that it's fairly thick and it folds easily, and it has a good, I don't know if you can say the paper's malleable, but I'm going to say that. And I mix up a rice starch, water, pigment, acrylic paint. It can be watercolor paint, but if I'm using watercolor paint, I add polymer medium so that when it dries, it's not going to go anywhere. This is a technique called cephalopod cane in polymer clay. These I molded. I found a little soap mold from, gosh, a zillion years ago. And so I made these little figures. And I used to pick up a to go to school. And she had the most wonderful face. She was from Somalia. And almost all of her family had been killed. She was too young to be at Global Village, but she had no other place to go. So we did, let her know. And I made her to look like this little girl. Just the most marvelous face. Our cutoff age, our ages were from 12 to 18. And this child couldn't have been more than 9. But she made it. And she's now on full scholarship at Agnes Scott. Oh, really? We did a good job. Here's another one. It's the same thing. I just love these figures. I wanted to play with her head covering, and I never knew that I could braid polymer clay. Obviously I can. And I was very happy with it. These little pieces here are amber. Somebody gave me an amber necklace, and was very surprised when I kindleized it to make this figure. But I could have worn one necklace, or 5 figures can have amber on them. There's no choice. I love to work with boxes. These are all Altoid tins. And then there are cookie boxes. I think there may be a cigar box in there somewhere, lozenges. These things appear on my porch. And I bring them in and start messing with them. I make all the beads, I don't make them all. I make most of the beads. And then I cut out different things and collage on. I love layers. I love the possibility of discovering things. Although I have to be honest, these don't open. If you were to open them, you would be so surprised at how much junk is in there, because there's all kinds of wires and sewy things and stuff that holds the arms and legs on. And I make this size, and then I make a little bit bigger ones. And it's so rewarding to take a sow's ear and make a silk purse. Mm-hmm. My grandfather used to say, Susie, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And what's the phrase now? Hold my beard? So over here, these are made of hook-up parts. I have a neighbor whose father worked for the United Nations in Yemen, and he would go all over the world building wells in small towns in areas where they didn't have a well. And oh, by the way, while he was building the well, he would find a school teacher and build a school. And oh, by the way, while they were doing that, he put in some sort of program for prenatal care and care of young children. So this man, the well builder, son lives in Pine Lake, where I live, and he died. An older man died. And his son came to me and said, Susan, I have all these hookahs that my dad collected when he was in Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, all the places over there.
All the stands.
And where?
All the stands.
All those stands. So he said, do you think that your adult students in Clarkson in the refugee community would like these? I didn't know. So I picked out a woman who looked like a person of substance, and I went to her and I said, ma'am, I've got these hookahs. Would you like them? Because there are coffee houses that are run specifically for the refugee community, where people can go, and I guess men mainly, go and talk and visit. The women have the sewing classes for that. Well, this woman took my hands in hers and said, if you give a used hookah to the coffee house, it's as if you have come and given them an ashtray full of cigarette butts. Oh. And I thought, well, we can't do that. So I called my friend and said, do you mind if I cannibalize these hookahs and turn them into figures? And he said, oh, you can't do that. Well, again, hold my beer. So I started messing with the hookah parts, and this is one top of a hookah, this is the bottom of a hookah, this is another bottom of the hookah, and I have even more stuff at home to make figures. I just had fun with it. And the idea of a hand with a leaf in the center coming out of the fork where you would normally put a hookah pipe is just fabulous to me. I love the notion of that. So I made these, and I've made a few more. These are all that are left after the pandemic. And I like them a lot. I'm big on verdigris, as you can tell. So once I got these all assembled, I started doing verdigris on them. And I do that with a special patinating liquid. It requires some time, and I put it on, and then I flush it off, and then I put it on and flush it off, until I get the effect that I want. And given that these are all bronze, they take verdigris finish very, very well. So let's look over here. This was a hand-woven silk that somebody gave me, and I just cut it on the bias and covered up this figure. She has turquoise embellishments. She also has polymer clay embellishments, and she looks what a sweet face. And I love the notion of the great mother, the divine feminine. So my figures want to honor that.
What is the piece that's?
I'm sorry.
What is this piece?
Those are gears. They're gears.
Oh, okay, it's a gear.
Yeah, they represent a halo. I will use anything to get what I want to get where I want to go. And those of you who work in mixed media know exactly what I'm talking about. We're walking along and we go, "Ooh, there's a treasure." This was a dog biscuit can. And I made a few of these on the postcard, the one with 3 figures across. They represent the fates. One fate spins the thread of life, the second one measures it, the third one cuts it. So that's what that little figure on the postcard is about. And I decided to put sisters on here and give them beautiful armor. I think that sometimes we need armor in our lives. They're fun too. And it says, because of Mr. McConnell in the U.S. Congress, who spoke to Elizabeth Warren, said, "Nevertheless, she persisted." Boy, that's money in the bank. I have used that phrase so many times since he said it. I thought it was just a fabulous thing to say. I'm so glad he did. And here's another, these are all motherly figures. This fabric that you see here, the white, is bias cut wool, and it was donated to the Southeast Fiber Arts Alliance up in Chamblee, Georgia. I used to sit on the board for the Southeast Fiber Arts Alliance. And this was at one of our fiber sales. Nobody wanted it, so I took it on home and started using it. The last 3 figures are these 3 over here, and they are built on a traditional historic doll figure. It's called a stump doll. And a stump doll obviously was made from a stump. But what it has come down to are figures that are weighted. They have a lot of weight in here. What do you think is in here?
Rice.
Rice? Wood?
Lead.
Gravel. It's kitty litter.
Ah!
A plastic bag filled with kitty litter, sealed and stuffed down into the bottom of. Never used.
Doesn't matter.
Somebody always says that.
It's in a plastic bag.
I'm not telling. I would say that it's new. So here's the African Hishi, the African vinyl record Hishi. These are wooden beads that who knows where they came from. And then I like masks on people, so I put, well, we all like masks, but I mean, you know, the traditional ritual mask that says this is a holy person, this is someone who is engaged in earth healing, earth magic. Any questions?
Yes.
The polymer you're using, is that like Fimo or Sculpey or something
I
like that?
use Primo.
Primo.
It's by Sculpey.
Right, okay.
Fimo's okay, but I like Sculpey. I never, ever, ever use Sculpey 3. It's junk. It breaks. It's great for kids because kids, you know, they make a Gumby and they're happy with it, but I want my art to, you know, to last.
Primo.
So it's Primo, Premo. Somebody had a question?
When you make the arms, they're so tiny. And
They are.
Are you sewing them and then flipping them?
Which arms are you talking
Any
about?
of
Oh,
the-
these?
Yeah, the arms.
Well,
You know, some that are stuffed with the muslin that they're stuffed.
if I'm using muslin, Sometimes I put wire in all of my
Right,
limbs.
so that they
So
won't
that,
form.
well, and I either cover them with fiberfill and wrap them in fabric, where I make a fabric arm and put a piece of wire in there and stuff it.
Mhm.
But I want there to be mobility, so that when I pose these pieces, they stay posed.
And then the cone shape, is that?
And the what?
The cone shape inside, is it wood or is that a trade secret?
It's not a trade secret. It's not styrofoam. The first time I made a figure out of styrofoam and put it into the oven to cure the.
No.
Did you have to buy a new oven?
Think the Wicked Witch of the West, when she says, "Help me, help me." That was my reaction. It's melted, and it just went and died. So the cones are, this is a trade secret.
Oh, sorry,
They're
that's okay, then
cardboard.
never mind.
They're cardboard. And they're available on Amazon.
Okay, I've seen them.
I'm sorry?
I've seen those.
Yeah. My mother used to use them a lot for Christmas stuff. She stuck things on
I like
cardboard
the
cones.
buttons on them like Christmas trees.
Right.
They're very full, like that.
Yeah.
They're very full, right?
Originally, yeah.
Are they thread spools, you said? Or thread?
No, well, I know what you're saying. I used to weave, and so I know what you mean about those. This is an actual cone. Here's a cone, there's our small cones. And then if you see pieces with a more of a body shape than this cone shape, that's a shape pattern that I make. And sew and stuff. Everything, it's just humble materials.
Do you
So
make,
much
do you
fun.
make one at a time, or do you make several
I make
at the
one
same
at a
time? Okay. Give each one its personality and then move on.
And about how long do they take you?
Forever. I've been doing this a long time. I mean, not just these figures. I've been an artist my whole adult life. People say, how long does it take? Well,
As long as it takes.
you know, you ask your doctor, how long did you have to study before you could do this? I think I've been in school my whole life. And I've been privileged to go to, I went to Penland and was paid to do that as an assistant instructor. I've been to Haystack up in Maine. These are all fine art craft schools. I was an assistant instructor. And then when I worked at National Shakespeare in New York as a costumer, and so young. I was just out of college, went straight to New York and said, I'm here, and New York said, so what? That was a real wake-up call. And I went to work at National Shakespeare, and National Shakespeare sent me to the Fashion Institute for Technology. And I got to learn pattern drafting and pattern making. Those were the two things that I really was lacking in, because I was wed to commercial patterns. I didn't know how to draft a pattern. And I learned how, and what a difference in my work. I could make a pattern that would serve me the way I wanted it to be. I wasn't adjusting or making do with commercial patterns. So that was a huge leap into artistic freedom, to take those two classes in pattern drafting and draping. It was fast. Anybody else?
Yeah, I noticed there's a server page, frozen image in the middle.
Say it again?
I noticed there's a server page,
Yes.
frozen image.
Yes.
That's from India or?
I have lots of these.
That should be a group.
Yeah, they're pretty wonderful. I got them at a jewelry show from a man who had all those little devotionals, he called them. And he said they came from Tibet. You may know better than I. I am a scavenger. I see something pretty and I'm like, I'm mad. Yeah.
Why do we use?
The
I
wheels.
remember using the thing at my
I
parents'
found a
house.
set of wheels at the yard sale. And I thought, what would happen if I put wheels on a figure? Well, we all had those, remember the pull toy when you were a kid that went whack, 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 whack? I had a duck, so that was. And I was thinking, these are sort of children's but they are evocative of children's toys. So I put a set of wheels on one of the figures, and people went, ah, wheels! And so wheels appear on my front porch. And I do lots of different types of wheels. These are wooden, no, these are metal that someone gave me, and then I have the little metal wheels on
I
there
thought
too.
you did it because women are always moving.
We got places to go and
Things to do.
Very cool.
thank you so much.